Introduction to Algebra, Part 1, What is Algebra? At the end of this lesson, you will know what algebra is, understand the concept of variables, and understand how to take a word problem and convert it into a formula. Algebra is the idea of taking word problems, real-world problems, and converting them into formulas which we can solve. So let's take an example of a word problem. Babs has 3 apples and Larry gives her 2 apples. How many apples does Babs have? Well, we take the 3 apples that Babs has, the 2 apples that Larry gives her, add them together, 3 plus 2, and we get 5. So let's take another example of a word problem. Babs has $100 in the bank and is earning 2% interest per month. That's 0.02. How much money does she have? Well, we take 100 plus 100 times 0.02, and we get $102. So now let's go back to our first problem. Babs has 3 apples and Larry gives her 2 apples. How many apples does Babs have? Well, in this case, we're going to say A is the number of apples that Babs has. A equals 3 plus 2. So in this case, A, the number of apples that Babs has, is 5. So let's go back to our second example. Babs has $100 in the bank and earns 2% interest. How much money does Babs have? Well, let's say M is the amount of money that Babs has. M equals 100 plus 100 times 0.02. That's 2% interest. M equals 100 plus $2, or M is $102. So now let's use this second example slightly differently, where we say Babs has $100 in the bank and is earning 2% interest. How much money does Babs have? Well, M is the amount of money that Babs has, and then I is the interest rate, which is 2%. Now in this case, the formula is M equals 100 plus 100 times I, the interest rate. So in that previous example, you'll notice we had 2 variables, the letter M and the letter I. M was the money you ended up with, and I was the interest rate. This introduces the concept of dependent and independent variables. Independent variables are variables where we know the value or they're not calculated based upon something else. So for in this example, I is the independent variable, and it's 2%. Dependent variables are variables that we have to calculate based upon everything else. So in this example, M is our dependent variable because M is going to change based upon what the value of the letter I is. So we can use this concept of independent versus dependent variables to do different calculations. And if you look on the screen, you'll see here we say, what if the interest rate is 2%? I is 2%. M is 100 plus 100 times 0.02, or 102. But what if we change the value of the interest rate, I, from 2% to 3%? Well, then it's 100 plus 100 times 0.03, or 103. Or what if it's 4%? In this case, it's 100 plus 100 times 0.04, or $104. So here you see how changing our independent variable, the letter I, affects our dependent variable, the letter M. So let's see what you've learned. I'm going to ask you some questions, and then you can pause the video and answer them. And the next slide, the next picture, will show you the answers. If A equals 100 plus 5, what is the value of A? Second question, if B equals 100 plus 5 times I, what is the value of B if I is 7? If Babs has 10 pairs and Scott takes 3 pairs, how would you write this down as a formula if P equals the number of pairs that Babs ends up with, and ultimately, how many pairs does Babs end up with? Go ahead and pause now and take time to answer the questions. So let's go through the questions. So if we say A equals 100 plus 5, what is the value of A? A is 100 plus 5, or $105. The second question is B equals 100 plus 5 times I. What is the value of B if B is 7? Well, B equals $135. Babs has 10 pairs and Scott takes 3 pairs. How would you write this down as a formula if P equals the number of pairs that Babs ends up with? Well, P equals 10 minus 3, the number of pairs that Babs has, minus the number of pairs that Scott takes. And how many pairs does Babs end up with? Well, 10 minus 3 is 7. This is the end of lesson 1. Thank you for watching this video.